Hello, everyone. Today I'm together with a very dear friend of mine, even if we are completely spread across the world, Serene. And I thought that we shall speak again about burnout. And why so? Because I think that burnout so many women, almost, I think it was 45% of women are touched by burnout. It is a 10-point difference um, um, against men. And we see also that in the Gen Zs are really, it's skyrocketing, the burnout cases that we see amongst this young generation. So I thought let me have a discussion with one person who's really dedicating now her work and with burnout, Serene. And maybe, a very warm welcome. Serene, go ahead, maybe that you present yourself, who you are, and then we dive into the questions.
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Serene, and I've been an executive coach for 10 years. Many years ago, about 15 years ago, I burned out and then I stayed at home for 2 years. I wasn't able to work. And so last year for Women's Day, the Singapore's national newspaper actually asked me to be interviewed for my experience and to share it with other women. And what has come of that is an extraordinary kind of connection and outpouring from others, actually both men and women, about their burnout experience. And so, especially over the course of this year, I was really quite shocked to see a lot of my clients, a lot of the senior leaders that I work with, are all showing the symptoms that I showed when I burnt out in my 30s. And therefore, a couple of months ago, I just decided that I was going to make my practice about burnout and just focus on the problem, because I actually feel like it's such an alarming thing to keep hearing it over and over in the course of my coaching work.
Thank you very much. So this is the reason why you and I we prepared when we prepared our this webinar. We thought we would like to focus on three areas. One is how can we recognize and address burnout? The second one is what can leaders do to support and potentially also, to support burnout or bring a culture which is diminishing the cases of burnout. And maybe that the third one is maybe that you can give or share with our audience one or two tips around what to do. So if we go back now to the first question, topic, addressing the burnout, and let me start with a why question, which is really important to you. Why do many leaders believe that powering through, and you see already my gesture,
Yes.
powering through burnout is the best answer to this?
I think many senior leaders have an opinion of themselves as being very strong, very resilient, very capable, and high performance. And the truth is, they certainly are. And so when the workloads get too much, they feel like if I only were just a little bit more organized, I bring a bit more focus to the work, I should be able to get through to it. And it's that mentality almost of, I am superwoman or superman. If I just set my mind to it, I could do anything, right? And I don't know how your childhood is like, but that was the myth I was brought up on, right? Like, oh, women empowerment, you can do anything if you put your mind to. Well, guess what? It's not true. We are all human. And one of the issues is leaders aren't seeing burnout as being important enough for themselves, that's first of all, but also for their people. So when they see people overcommit, they see this as a sign of dedication to their job, real loyalty to the organization, rather than seeing it as a crisis, possibly precipitating a lot of health problems. And to give you an idea, physical issues, everything from heart attack. I've had clients have spinal infections. I've had clients who develop autoimmune disorders. And if you think of it in a very cold way, think of how much the company will be backing these people in terms of their medical disorders. Secondly, I have clients who fall into depression, into anxiety, who are then unable to work. I was so exhausted, I couldn't work for 2 years. Right? So think of the consequences to the organization, think of the consequences to the person. And if we are the leaders themselves, just think of it as what's the price you're going to pay in terms of your health and maybe in terms of your family because somebody has to look after you. If you just ignore it and go like, you know what, whatever it is, no matter how much it is, as long as I set my mind to it, I'm committed to the company, I'll just power through.
But how can we, how can leaders see that? I mean, if you get a flu, you see the person suffering, or if you have someone with a headache or migraine, you see them already coming, like, oh, please don't, not too much light. But usually you don't, um, I mean, this was the case for me. I mean, when I got confronted with some employees touched by burnout, it is really, I mean, I knew two things. Oh, this person is touched by burnout. I cannot talk about burnout with that person. So, what shall I do? And I was unable, really unable to see that it was happening, that it was brewing in the background, and I didn't see it. So, what can be done there? What are the signs that you can see?
The first sign is when a good performer with a strong sense of responsibility starts to fall behind her work. That's probably one of the most noticeable sign. Every leader will pick up on it because it involves KPI fulfillment, and for a lot of the performers themselves, that's also what they kind of start to feel. They're like, look, I'm 10 steps behind. I had a senior leader tell me, I'm 10 steps behind on everything. Right? At work, at home, and everything. I'm forever playing catch up. So for somebody who is a good performer and has always been a good performer, somebody whom you trust to have a good working attitude, the moment you see that, that is a clear warning sign, and it is for the leader to sit down and go, let's talk about your work. Right? Let's talk about your work, not in the sense of judgment, but let's talk about what's really happening. And later we'll talk a little bit about the sort of the vicious cycle of burnout. But let's really start to talk about what's happening for you. And for the leaders themselves as well, right? The moment you start to feel like, look, I can't catch up no matter what I do, even if I work weekends, even if I work evenings, I'm not catching up anymore. That's also a clear sign of, look, it's time to cut back. And actually, for my personal, I would actually encourage leaders to go, oh no, I'm having to work evenings and weekends to catch up. That should be the first warning sign. Like, weekends and evening should not be a given. Yes.
That is true, but what to do? And I recall one case when we started talking. I mean, first when we started talking with this person, you are not allowed to say, I mean, to give any medical, advices, or to say, okay, it would be good maybe for you to see your your MD, because you cannot do that. And the other thing that I noticed is that we were addressing that really head on and saying, okay, how can we help you? What can we do? Can I take some of your work? And the person reacted in a very passive aggressive way, defensive. No, 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 I can handle that. I mean, even if I know that I'm behind, I can do that. How can leaders then still help the person? Because often this person wasn't aware of, I mean, at that time, that the burnout was waiting, just behind the door. So what can be done for leaders? Because sometimes it's not only a bad, let's say, we overlook that, we just want to have results, and etc. It's not, even if sometimes you want to help, the person doesn't let you or doesn't want to get some help?
So burnout comes in three stages. And if one of the ladies who do the most work on this, Christina Maslach, she talked about how it's a triad. And the first and most key element is something called emotional exhaustion.
Hmm.
It's where you kind of you feel tired, right? You feel tired because emotionally, physically, you cannot do what is demanded of you. And it's not a workload only issue. Obviously, workload doesn't help, but like during COVID times, for example, a lot of the medical staff talked about this emotional exhaustion, right? Where they
Yes.
wanted to be there
Yes.
for the patient, but there was nothing they could do, right? If there is no oxygen machine, there's no treatment, right? What can they do? And that feeling of emotional exhaustion, that's the first. Now, if that isn't dealt with, and this is where I think your staff was, it moves into the second stage where it's called depersonalization or just simply cynicism, right? In order to protect myself, I start to distance myself away from other people, from work, from family, from friends, from colleagues. So everything that they give me is viewed as negative, is viewed as a threat, and so on, because this is the only way for me to protect myself because I cannot handle any more demands for emotional connection from anyone else anymore. I'm so exhausted, and that's the second stage of it. And the
Mm.
third stage of it becomes um, what we call inefficacy at work, right? So they start to feel as though there's nothing they can do at work, it's helpless. And at this point, they are falling behind so much that they probably are not performing much at work.
Yes.
And they start to feel like I'm completely useless, I'm not able to contribute anything, or work is meaningless, it doesn't add any value, and so on. And what happens is then that causes more emotional exhaustion and the whole cycle repeats itself. So the first catch is probably when people look or feel or sound tired. So the moment you can kind of really see them as being tired, that's probably the point to start. To go, hey, notice you're really tired, like what's happening, right? And have that conversation, not so much about, oh, you're not coping and so on, because that's taken, unfortunately, in many places still as an affront of my capability is not up to scratch, right? But the conversation around, I notice you're really tired, and what is it that we can do to support you being less tired? And we'll talk a little bit about that later when we talk about what the organization can do. But having that conversation early rather than later when they already start to be very cynical about it,
Yes.
it's helpful. Now, if you really do get one where they're already very cynical about it, then maybe the realization of actually what is the consequence. Because I have met many burnout survivors where, just like myself, for years they couldn't work or they suffered long lasting medical conditions that never goes away, right? And giving that understanding of, look, this may be much more serious than what you think it is. And we are concerned about your long term health much more than just you can't work, right? Um, and shall we have a look at what we can do to support you? And workload is only one of it, honestly. There's so many other things that needs to be talked about than just workload.
That is really really interesting because I can only say that from a personal experience when I worked with our health insurance. I mean, for the company, they are absolutely, they are willing to help, and to support that, because the long term effects are so dire. And but let's go to that in the second topic. um, I think that when we were talking about powering through, I must say, I belong to, okay, my background is from professional service industry, so consulting. So you are, you it is absolutely expected from you that you work long hours, that you're here, period, and you deliver. And I recall it took me quite a long of time to understand that my own behavior because I wanted to, also 24 hours to try to extend them to 48 hours. I never managed to do that. For 20 years, I tried, really hard. So I worked during also the night or pretty late in the night. And I was sending, very at night, literally at night, all the emails, so I was catching up with everything. And I was doing that in the quietness of the night. For me, it was really relaxing. And then one day, one employee came to me and said, "Are you aware of that you're completely stressing us out with your emails because we are so scared when we arrive at work, or we at that time it was with the BlackBerry, then with the iPhone, we see, oh, shoot, again, another email from Catherine at 7:30 or 6 a.m. in the morning, that when they were reading that. And so it's so we leaders, we on one side, we produce stress with others without really realizing that. And that only as a tip for our audience, because we are not necessarily aware of, these are blind spots, typically a typical blind spot. The other thing is, and that is a little bit more, and it's the first time I'm speaking about that, is when you are so much under pressure, even if you love it. I mean, you love your job, and it's exciting, and it's thrilling to see the results. It takes a toll on us. And you mentioned Maslach, and we are going to post the link. There is a very easy assessment to do with regard to where you're standing. And I was very much also, I had the feeling that I could be the next in line, with the burnout, but didn't feel comfortable at all talking about that with my manager, because I didn't trust the person when it came to that. Some others, I mean, but with the burnout and how they could, put me aside as in my leadership position, was something that I wanted absolutely to keep confidential. So when I took the Maslach assessment, it was about, first the emotional exhaustion, which I was. I mean, at that time, definitely the depersonalization. And when you're sitting in management or board meetings, and somehow it doesn't touch you anymore. You don't. You hear. I mean, you're there, but you're not there. That is also a sign where you should be also looking at. I mean, I was always very lucky, where I was always green. I mean, I did red and the rag. I used this method to assess myself, was the personal accomplishment. The personal accomplishment was always in green. So I knew, okay, no burnout. But I had still, to deal with that. And I think that this is something where leaders should become aware of, that this is also something which can also touch someone in a leadership, even in a high leadership position. And I guess you have a lot, from what I can see and what we talked about. You have a lot of leaders also who are touched by burnout, right?
Yes. And in fact, I don't see the rates as being lower in senior leadership. A lot of senior leaders, they are holding more responsibility, and as a result, they are pushing themselves harder. Right? I had a head, a CEO of a really large organization. He hates the organization for that country, as in MNC, but he says, look, if I don't deliver on my numbers, 1,000 people could lose their jobs.
Yes.
So I have to deliver on these numbers. And therefore, there's that push. And sometimes I feel it's really sad. It is the best leaders who care the most about their people, who take on the most personal responsibility for their numbers. Those are the ones that burn out.
And it is interesting because for me, my savior was at that time to go and do a retreat. So for 5 days, I was, with the nuns in France, south of Paris, and I was, just to think and to get this space, to create again the space around me. And I came across a book written by a French medical doctor who is now also a Catholic priest. And he wrote a book about and I'm going to translate it from French to English, Burnout, the illness of giving. And I thought it was a really, and it absolutely highlights and underlined what you're saying, that people who are caring the most for their organization, for their teams, for their clients, and it can be also nurses, teachers, it can be other people who are caregivers, are the most who are able to be subject to that.
Yes.
So, which leads me to our second topic. What can we do to create a culture which is less, I wouldn't say proning burnout, but where we can respectfully and in an anticipatory way, deal that with burnout, and especially as we are in a world of change, of constant change, of constant, I mean, so many things are shifting. Would it be on political, would it be wars? Is it sustainability? Is it, climate crisis, the environmental, everything? AI is completely changing everything. And in companies, we see that, I mean, there is, I think, no single corporate or SME, larger SMEs, which are not working constantly in a permanent way of transforming and changing whatever needs to be changed or adapted. What can we do there?
So the first is obviously this workload issue, right? I mean, exactly what you said, because people are transforming, they are moving position. So a lot of times the rules are being rewritten. A lot of employees are being asked to double hat while creating new, processes, while at the same time dealing with retrenchment and no headcount replacement, while at the same time dealing with a changing market, and all being asked to keep the same KPIs. So there is this almost insanely unreasonable expectation on people that's been going around. And this kind of almost culture of overwork is probably the first sign of warning if you're talking about culture. Because what happens is, if it's a very short period of time, we can probably ask people to have like peak periods, right? But the truth is, it's no more a peak period. It can be, 3 reorganization in a year, and 4 peak years, all the way from COVID until now, when people are being asked to do more with less, and so on, right? So that's the first thing, which is, when it comes to workload, what is it that we need to stop doing because our strategic intent has moved, the market has changed? I always use a kid with my leaders that if anybody can create a new work process, right? Like even the lowest member, a clerk can go, hey, I need this new form. And then there's a new process. The boss says, okay, go ahead. And then this new form is created and a new process is created. But to take that same work process out will require the boss approval or the boss's boss approval and so on and so forth. Because everybody's afraid, if this form has been used for 5 years, to suddenly go, yeah, we don't need this form anymore, take that out. So what I'm trying to say is a ruthless, almost, because it's ruthless prioritization, a really ruthless look at the work that we are doing and taking away as much of it that's not value adding as possible. There is Dutch economists who calculate that there could be as much as like 50% of the work is not adding value. So that's something to think about. That's the first. And then beyond that, workload is not the only issue, right? A lack of control over your work. We know that there's a centralization of power to global now, where power used to reside in the markets. Now all the power is being centralized to global in many MNCs since COVID. And that lack of control is affecting people's ability to manage their own lives and also making them feel very disempowered, which then leads to this next one, right? Where people feel like they're not being rewarded for putting in the extraordinary effort. And a lot of it comes down to visibility, right? Because if the powers are all in global, then in the markets, people are not seeing your good work. And because people are not seeing your good work, there's a feeling that it's not fair. We are still doing the same stuff, but we're not being as acknowledged or as rewarded, right? And reward is also internal, right? What happens is when we retrench people and don't replace them, we break the social ties at work. And like if we all work as a team, part of the reward is going there and seeing your friends in a team and we all work together and we are trying to accomplish something together. That's also rewarding in itself and not happening anymore. So those are all the things. And the final one will then be when you kind of realize that, hey, what I value and what the organization value, it doesn't align anymore. So those are all the parts where organizations can do better, right? Looking at the overwork culture, looking at the amount of control people have, are rewards being given out? Are they enough? Are they fair? Are you fostering good employee relationship, being supportive as a leader? And finally, what are the values of the organization? And we can say something, but how is it being felt by the people on the ground? Those are the few things.
I love what you said, and I think that I think also it is the importance of allowing yourself to say no helps the leaders also to tailor the workload or the dispatch of work to be handed over to this and the other person. And I want to come back also to the one thing that I realized, which I would have continued to do, by the way, every year, had I stayed in my CEO role, and not stepping down for my PhD, is really to actively bring in your health insurance, because they are really, I mean, they are organizing workshops with your people without the leadership. Just be ready for that. You're not invited. It was really frustrating for me. But where people can, I mean, the teams can discuss among themselves what is helping, what is not helping, and where and how to adjust the limits of workload. Because sometimes when you feel depersonalized and you have this emotional exhaustion, your limits are shrinking. So whenever you get something additionally, whoa, it's something, you step on the brake, and you become defensive when you're becoming aware of what is happening and how you can also regain control. It is something which is really important. But I totally agree with you that centralization and disempowering people, and also considering, well, this is a small, I mean, like for instance, Switzerland is a small country, right? I mean, even if there are some very Singapore too, but even if there are very large corporations or headquarters sitting there, you try to do everything that New York said, and you try to adapt, and then the reward is, yeah, you didn't achieve it. So I get it, but it also the role of the leaders to say, okay, listen, I mean, you have your market constraints, we have ours, and I always say, put the soul in the wound, of your leaders above you, and show them what the consequences could be, especially if you have a dry talent market, and where you can not only exchange people, someone is sick, okay, let's move out the person, bring someone in. And this leads me to another point, which is, I think, very important, is um, the Gen Z generation, and them feeling, I mean, how they feel. Because I think you and I, we come from a generation, you said it before we went live so beautifully. Um, when we started our careers, everything was ahead of us. Okay, we had the 2000 IT bubble and crisis, but besides that, everything was fine. And today, nowadays, can you tell me what you hear from the younger generations?
Yeah, I mean, what happens is for a lot of the younger generation, the Gen Zs coming into the workforce right now, what they see is exactly what we are feeling, right? A lot of restructuring, a lot of reorganization, companies becoming less and less vested in people and more vested in technology. And for example, AI threatening their jobs. And a lot of them have just gone through a couple of years of educational disruption with COVID. So they're coming into a world that is way more uncertain, where environmental issues, which I'm sure you're well aware of, and even social unrest is threatening, world peace, world economy, and maybe even the survival of the planet. So a lot of these things weigh heavily on them. And I was just telling you, right, when we came into to work, we thought, yeah, we're going to climb the corporate ladder. The world looks good ahead of us. And that's just not true anymore. So for a lot of them, that sense of I better, perform, I better make it, I better make sure that I'm able to, do 110% so that my bosses can see me and I'm not the first one to be French, weighs quite heavily. And it's just a different world, honestly.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. Yeah, absolutely. So, which shows that there's even more work for leaders to become aware of, and to work on the prevention, and for themselves, also for themselves, but also for their teams, to get aware of, or to become more aware of what burnout is, where it comes from, how we can empower people. I mean, you said it so beautifully. So, what is one tip that you would give to the audience? When
Well,
it's about strategies and tools.
I would say probably the first tip is not so much strategies and tools, but to first take stock. I mean, we have the much luck, inventory, but not inventory, but whatever it is, to just step back and go, hang on, wait a minute, is what I'm doing sustainable? Right? Am I burning myself out at both ends of the candle? And
Yes.
that's the first step. Beyond anything else, to step back and go, hang on, is this actually working for me? Because without that awareness, nothing else happens. And
Mhm.
please, if your answer to yourself is no, my current workload, my current pace, my current, you know, job at the home and at work is not sustainable, please, you said very beautifully just now, have the courage to say, okay, no, no, this is not going to carry on. No, I will now do something about it. And it cannot be, yeah, it's not sustainable. And you know what? I'll just, suck it up and sweep it under the carpet. I had a senior leader come and told me that he burned out before. And way before he burned out, he actually attended a health talk. And he ticked 10 out of 10 of the burnout warning signs. And he and his workmate were both joking about it, that they both hit all 10 in the webinar. And both of them burned out within a year and couldn't work. So that's something that what I will say, that's the first thing, please, to take it seriously. To step back, check, and then take it seriously.
You know, because you went yourself through burnout, and the picture of you, which I posted, on the thumbnail, of our. I found it so beautiful. I'm getting now personal because whenever, I mean, it's a beautiful message that I think that you give to others is that, okay, it might be a painful moment of your life, but once you're through it, I mean, there's so many new opportunities, different types of opportunities which show up, and the calmness and the serenity which you wear your first name so well, which come through this picture is was for me also the reason why I wanted to share and to have this discussion today with you, because yeah, there's so much to do, and on the other side, without any problems, we wouldn't be there, right? I mean, so let's tackle them. And I think it is about anticipation, becoming more sensitive, and knowing that burnout is a illness, and we need to help others, work with your peers, go to Serene and others, who are taking that, who are helping people in a burnout situation to recover, but also what the next steps are. um, and yeah, I mean, thank you so much, Serene, for this moment and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I mean, as you can tell, this thing is very close to my heart, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about it. And I hope some of the people listening to this will take at least the first step, right, to go and check out and see if they themselves are burnout.
We are going to post, maybe that you want to do that, that you can post the MBI, the Maslar Burnout Inventory. It's an assessment
Sure.
which takes 10 minutes, and
Yes.
which is a good starting point. And as an employer, work with your insurance companies, because I mean, I can almost say that I'm no more an employer today, but as an employer, we have a responsibility, social responsibility towards our employees, and that we need to take care of that. Okay, thank you so much, and
Thank
we'll see each other. And please reach out to Serene whenever you have a question. Thank you so much. Bye
you very
bye.
much. Thank you.